our special LCAAC meeting to order at 5:02 this evening. And so we'll go ahead and start with our roll call, and thank you to Anne for taking our minutes today at this special meeting. All right, Brian.
Present.
Excellent. And Anne. Great. Kevin.
Present.
Yep, present.
Okay, Devanshi.
Present.
Great. Nishi.
Present.
Excellent. Yen. I know Yen said that they were going to be here, so we'll look out. Look again, okay? Divya. No Divya yet. Calvin. No. Anna.
Here.
Excellent. Quisha.
Here.
Great. Marinelle. Okay. No Marinelle. Crystal. Let's see, Crystal. Gabriella. No. Okay. And I don't see Larona yet. Okay. Michael, we know is not going to make it. Ivy.
Here.
Thank you. And then our non-voting members, we have Mr. Musto.
Here.
Excellent. And Assistant Superintendent Salinas.
Here.
Great. And we don't have anyone from business here today. Trustee Jones.
Here.
Great. And I don't see Trustee Campbell. And then at a regular meeting, like we had talked about, Michael will be working on the roster so that we can update not only for any members whose terms are coming up and they can then submit their name again to continue if they'd like, but also if people have had trouble attending, then it can be up to the board to actually decide to appoint additional members there. All right, so Letty, did we receive any public comment this evening?
We did, and I'm gonna move let me look at that right now. We do have public comment. So the first comment is, no name, but thank you for addressing student demands. It's really encouraging to see parents and staff listen to students. I am in support of the LCAAC proposal to address mental health needs. The second comment, no name, in a district that is 90% students of color, I hope that the district is finally planning to invest in multilingual, multicultural parenting workshops and wellness program. It has been overdue for years, and I hope that the district will commit to moving it forward. I'm similarly glad to see the district recommend that we focus on providing additional counseling, mental health support, and professional development. And I apologize because I'm scrolling through these. Our third comment, public comment is, hello, I am an FUSD parent with 3 beautiful babies at Warwick Elementary School. As I have navigated the parenting experience, I've tried my best to teach my children how to voice their thoughts, feelings, concerns, etc. In our household, we address conflict, and for that, we are stronger. As a child, I remember being punished for my mistakes, and that only taught me to be afraid of adults in my world. I refuse to do that. Just a second. Our next comment is, thank you for responding to student concerns. It's reassuring to see parents and staff paying attention to students. The LCAAC plan to discuss mental health needs has my support. The next comment is, hi, I am a current junior at Washington High School. I'll keep this short because I don't know what to say besides thank you. Thank you for listening to us. This year has been really hard on us, and although I needed help, I felt bad reaching out to our counselors because I know other students have it worse than I do. Increasing the number of counselors we have access to and providing social workers to address our needs. And our next comment is from Marie Hughes. I support hiring more counselors and social workers and providing more mental health resources to the schools. Finally, FUSD needs to prioritize training and restorative practices for all teachers and staff. And our last comment is, thank you for addressing student demands. As a district, we need to be listening to our students when they speak more often. So it is encouraging that students' demands in regards to mental health are at least starting to be addressed. I am in support of the LCAAC proposal to address mental health needs. And that concludes our public comments.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, so next up we have our minutes from our April 26th meeting. So if you could take a look at that if you haven't, in particular, just to make sure that we have the attendance done. And that was noted correctly for you, but now would be the time for any adjustments or corrections. So if you have anything there, let us know.
This might be a good time to say, I did add a link to the agenda under resources that updated the incorrect data we had in the parent survey from the past meeting.
Sorry, Steve, do you mean that the link was adjusted where for what?
So on today's agenda,
Mhm.
if you go underneath upcoming meetings where it says resources, I have a link to the corrected data.
Okay, excellent. Okay, great. Perfect. And Steve did that exactly correct. We can't go back in time and change minutes of a meeting, but then he's fixing it so then everyone already has that. And even though we can't change the agenda, but then it's there for everyone to review. And then if we need some other action or to agendize something in the future, then we all have that. All right, awesome. I'm not seeing anyone in the queue. So unless there is objection, we will approve the minutes from April 26th by consent. Seeing none, you have approved the April 26th minutes. And we will go on to our main business now for today. So while I did link underneath the main document under amendments, those are previous links. It was just to provide reference so that if you wanted to catch up kind of on what we had done and what we were looking at, and also for the public to know the documents that guided what we're looking at. But then I shortened the amendments to really only include what we would be looking at today, because we did already have those standing things taken care of before. So if you want to look at that document, I can go ahead. Actually, I should just screen share. And hopefully that will work. All right, thumbs up. Does that look okay, what we're looking at? Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, it's finally. Okay.
It's tiny though.
All right. So let me zoom in a bit. All right. So the only ones that we looked at is from carryover were listed here. And I did this in just to condense the conversation that we've had, which is two things. And as Letty pointed out, on the far right, when it comes to expanded learning opportunities grants, we are just providing input. We're providing kind of thoughts of things that we might not be able to fund through LCAAC, and not only just because of our funding limitations as far as numerics, but also because the primary focus of LCAP funding needs to be bringing the gap for opportunities for our unduplicated students closed. But that doesn't mean that in the same vein of the things that we've already talked about, we could recommend that certain things that we've looked at be expanded. And we can recommend that to the school board and they take that as just, an LCAP recommendation. But those would not be numerical, that might not be included in what our actual LCAP amendments are for now.
And I do want to add that, Victoria, I want to add that last night was our first presentation to the public, but certainly to our trustees. And at last night's meeting, we added a special meeting for the approval of the expanded learning opportunity grant. And so input we get tonight will definitely be taken into consideration. I'm also going to be asking for more input from our African American PAC families. And so there's still a lot of really good opportunities. And I know our trustees want to expand getting more input. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Letty. And actually, part of Letty's presentation last night, so I had done this based on what our conversation and the input was that was given to our committee. But if you followed last night at all, on 3.3, I had put in there from our conversation about offering the 7th period, and the board has actually already approved that now. So they were getting that that feedback from multiple places. So that is something that is already being done. I'm just going to go over the kind of mathematical portion so we can see what we're focusing on here. So what we are looking at is, if you look down at the very bottom, we have an estimated award for this upcoming year of a bit over $16 million, and that will be the recommendation total. Like we shoot for that ballpark. We've already, through our previous approvals that we've looked at through our last meeting, have something totaling about $14.5 million. So that leaves these focus areas that we're talking about this evening, and we would only be recommending increases for up to about $1.6 million. So then when we look at what I've done is incorporate a bit of what we've talked about before, as well as cost approximations. What we want is, by the end, with our notes, what we have here is that the difference column down at the bottom, which I'm going to keep doing, Ivy, as you suggested, we all need to know what we're looking at. The difference column down at the bottom can only total right up to that $1.67 million. And so then the committee can look at this and then say, oh, we want to increase here, decrease here. I've heard a little bit more about this, and I think it needs more money, or so on, but we're still looking at the confines of that $1.67 million. Did anyone have any questions just about the chart itself, so that we're all on the same page with what we're looking at before we actually go over the line items? Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands. All right, so the portions that we have in green are the areas that we had talked extensively about, and in particular looking at increasing amounts. So committee consideration, I brought together just the notes from our meetings and from the input feedback that we were given. So we wouldn't be micromanaging of like, please offer this number of this professional development or this, that sort of thing, but we would be signaling our intent that we hope that the district would look at those items that have come up multiple times, like the mental and emotional health, trauma-informed practices, restorative practices, and then there was also spiraled into that, making sure that we capture what people have done with technology over the last year and a half and really use that as appropriate and maintain those skills, and are able to embed them to meet the needs of students in those individualized ways moving forward. So there's an increase there. I did note, if the district were to do something that would actually be a full day, all staff training, that might not potentially be something that LCAAC funding could fund every year ongoing. It is a big chunk. But from what we were talking about, we do think that there is a lot of value there. And we might, because there are so many areas that we see a need of, there might be a way then we could just suggest to the district, please consider having an all-day staff development, in August, that all staff can attend, and focus on a couple of these items that we do think are really important. but traditionally this is funded kind of the year-long types of professional development that are available on a monthly basis for staff that are interested. So did anyone have a question about any of those things or think something's missing before we move on? Okay, and that doesn't mean, because we still have to approve everything. So if you think of something, then we can absolutely come back to it at the end. All right, next. Oh, I see a hand now, Ivy.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. I was just thinking, like, I was watching the board meeting last night too. I think for goal number 4, which involves family, and some people were talking about, having parenting workshops, because I think mental health concerns are not just, it's from within the family structure. So, and I think when we put a lot of emphasis on school counselors, is there something that we can do? I don't know if this LCAAC fund can be used for parenting workshops. Yeah.
Absolutely, Ivy, and we will definitely get to that when we get down to that line item. So I'll certainly come back to you there. Yes.
Okay.
So let's, yeah, absolutely. Were there any other, anything else though on goal 1?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Nothing on goal 1 for me.
Okay, yeah, but let's definitely come back to that family engagement. All right. So 3.2 was another area we looked at expanding, and so we hadn't spent we hadn't spent as much as we had budgeted previously, which was the 1.1. This includes, while we and this I believe falls under Greg's department. Oh, wait, I see Nishi. Nishi, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like this might fall under 3.2, but always
Okay.
have presentations about like PBIS. And would this cover PBIS? Because especially with like this increase in funding, I feel like PBIS really falls under like increasing what the funding covers.
Yes, thank you, Nishi. Absolutely. So this will include, it isn't listed again because it's already listed in the things that we have talked about. And PBIS is absolutely one of them. And Rob Insert from Elementary Ed that you're recalling has presented to us. We have, through our funding, so we're supporting them actually extending PBIS to all elementary schools by the end of next year. They will all at least have started, right? There's a phasing in process. And so that all of our elementary schools will have had that opportunity through our funding and support for this from this committee, Nishi. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So the extension of this would be having collaboration with what we're doing, and this is part of kind of multi-tiered systems of supports, right? So, and Greg talked a bit about our counselors, which we'll get down to in a little bit. But as we get to higher needs students, and then also kind of the family wraparound that Ivy's talking about, while we could not support, Greg had thrown out 10, which we were all talking about all the things we want to do. This would fund maybe 5 or 6, and we would just leave this up to the district how they think this is best done, whether that's grade span or attendance area, but we leave that discretion to district management, who obviously knows better how to cohort those services. But this would be that funding. And then what we would be able to ask the district is, through those one-time, only a couple year, the expanded learning opportunity funds, we could start to ask for collaboration time for all of those specialists working along the multi-tiered systems. So existing counselors, new counseling staff, social workers, and really make sure that that can be a little bit more streamlined, since we would be expanding our program. And that could be that would be an appropriate use then of the expanded learning opportunity grant funds. Did anyone have any other thoughts on that? And thank you to Nishi for bringing up that yes, PBIS falls under this, which is why we already had this area extensively funded.
Yeah, and Victoria, I can add, I met with Greg Bailey and a lot of the folks in his department. They are actually starting to look at that after he did the presentation with the LCAAC the other night. He went back to his team and they're just kind of starting to look at what would be one of some of the scenarios. So yeah, and of course we have to look at just total cost of a position. So we would work with business services on that as well.
Yes, absolutely. And then obviously, so Letty's bringing that up, it takes time, and it'll take time out of the day, right, for people that are working to build up these plans. But meanwhile, counselors, for example, already have students they're supposed to be serving. So we could use expanding learning opportunity grant funds in order to have dedicated time to fully utilize the expansion of the program as we get that off the ground. Anything else on 3.2? Okay. 3.3, I actually had already mentioned. We had said that we wanted to continue to fund intervention. The committee had previously, a couple years ago, scaled back on summer school and intervention. Of course, that was pre-pandemic, and dealing with the budget and the outlook then. And now the committee had said that we were going to fund still maintaining a greater summer school and intervention program. So there was no change there. That's why it's not green. But we had the recommendation under ELOG, but the district has already done that. So there actually isn't anything new on 3.3. Did anyone have any questions or comments on that one? Okay. All right. So 3.9, and this would be something too, which we could, there'll be discretion at the district level for this as well. Greg had noted the previous position of social work was actually specifically for homeless foster youth. And so there might already be some system in place there. And that would be really a specialized situation. And so Greg had brought that up, so I included that. It might be, because again, ours is just a formal recommendation. It could be that based on the work that that Greg's department does, for student services, that they come up with a configuration that is a little bit different. But I added this in for one position based on what Greg had presented, and then the expanded learning opportunity grant fitting into this, specifically what we had received the presentation on for homeless and foster youth, which was earlier in the year, and then what we saw on the write-ups from the outreach that Steve and his team did. Was around class size reduction, particularly at those early grades, and getting students engaged in schools, and that we could really look at at funding that really at an earlier, just a grade span. So that was recommended. It's challenging to fund class size reduction just through LCAAC because we have to look at the percentages of unduplicated. It fits within our goals, but it is a challenge. So I listed that under the expanded learning opportunity grant, but that came up quite a bit in the input that we were getting. Any questions or comments on that one? Okay. All right, so I'm going to go to Ivy now, because we are now on the family engagement and partnerships, which Ivy, you had wanted to speak about.
Um, Thank you. Yeah, as I was saying earlier, I feel that there are a lot of, a lot of the mental stress and emotional issues are not limited to schools. I mean, they stem from families. And so sometimes I think we need to find a way to understand each other better or something, to share the culture, the diverse cultures that we all come from. And then somehow, I don't know if it's through, we personally, we had parenting workshops before, but then those are always kind of limited. It's kind of like preaching to the choir. Only a handful of parents will show up for that kind of workshops. So I don't know. I'm hoping to kind of brainstorm if other people might have the idea of how to engage the parents. I mean, because mental emotional health, we need support for each other to make our our to help us stay healthy. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't really have any constructive advice or suggestions as to what we can do. So when I mentioned earlier about parenting workshop, that was just something that we did before, but I'm not sure if it's useful because so I don't really have anything to offer other than just kind of throw it out here for everybody to think about.
Thank you, Ivy. And you're revisiting and summarizing perfectly why we put this in yellow. So I'm going to go to Steve next because the committee said they wanted to just kind of have an update and an overview on the kind of outreach that we're doing. And again, not just for the reason of do something different, but we do want to know we just kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about that. So this is a good time for that. Thank you, Ivy.
Thank you.
So I'm unfortunately not going to give a lot of concrete things as well, but I did want to say a couple things on the thing of parent surveys. This is something that not only this year, but last year before the pandemic, when we did the road shows, this is something parents were saying we need. I also think this is one of those things that perhaps district staff is not the best equipped to identify what the needs are. So I think we could do an allocation of funds here for workshops, for staffing, for materials and things like that. But what I was hoping to do as we're writing the LCAAP is to have this group, make it our charge at the beginning of next year to really identify early in the school year, what are the topics that we think would be of most interest to parents. And that's why I think this group is going to be the most important for giving the feedback. I think we could also utilize, since we're so familiar with surveys now, we could utilize any sort of survey, district surveys to gather information what parents are thinking as well. I know that when we did some of the parent presentations when I was at American, the counselors led these monthly presentations, and some attendance was better than others, but it was always well appreciated. So I think this is a place where we're going to really need this group to identify what our needs are for next year.
Letty, do you want to add in on that?
Yeah, and we've already got some great points of success that we're going to add on to. So as I was sharing last night, we have a parent group that is our PAC for migrant education students, so students whose parents work in migrant fields. So what happened at that PAC was that before we got to the data and input from the parents, we actually did a mini workshop where one of our community liaisons actually did a quick mini lesson on how parents can support math at home. It was in Spanish. And so we've got these just wonderful folks that are out there doing parent workshops. We've got them at the site level. We've got counselors. But I think what we're missing is perhaps how can we do something either attendance wide by attendance area or district wide? Because a lot of times it will fall on the principal to say, hey, you got a workshop for X, right? And if we can start to do some kind of a brochure of workshops that will be expected throughout the year that the district could certainly take the lead on, but then we tap the shoulders of our counselors and teachers and our community liaisons so that we could, certainly virtual, but as we start to come back to in person, there will be those opportunities. So I like the idea of us here giving input also at the beginning of the year. But I think one of the things that I was talking to to Greg Bailey about was, he's got folks that work directly with our parents, and there's a lot of resources there. We've got a Native American PAC community liaison. We've got a community liaison for migrant education. We've got them at some of the sites. And so perhaps it's convening them. And so I'm just kind of thinking outside of the box, but I think if we were to allocate some funding to parent education, what Ivy's right on target, that we look at something district-wide and then some site allocations to support. I tell you, a lot of times, parents are so busy, and if there's some funding at the site so that the principal or the teacher leader can provide a meal for families as they come to a parent workshop, that would go a long way as well. So I was just thinking we could do some district-wide, but certainly some funding for the sites to pay for meals. Babysitting is the other piece. A lot of times, maybe there's some student workers that could do some childcare in a room next door. That's the kind of stuff that sometimes stops parents from coming to a parent workshop.
Anne?
Leticia, you brought up so many of the things I was thinking. From the school level, there's two things that often are barriers to these kinds of events. One is we live now in a 24/7 world. Schools are open, basically from 8 to 4 during the week. That doesn't work for parents. They want to come and see me on Saturday, but we work it out. So we need to capitalize on what distance learning has done for us. We now stream and have these types of meetings and could have parent workshops on YouTube. Parents might be afraid to ask questions and share and have that on YouTube, but the presentation that a social worker could do or whatever, and then stop the video and let the questions and answers or, figure out a different format, just privacy in a way. And then the second real challenge, having a menu of workshops that would be available is great, but the huge challenge is the marketing, the advertising. It comes down to, do you put the Band-Aid on the kid or do you market the parent workshop? And the kid comes first. So as we all agree, I think that we need these parent workshops, but we need to put a plan together that deals also with marketing and advertising, and like the menu idea I loved, for planning ahead. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So thank you. Letty and then Anne continuing on how we can move forward for next year on those and building on those ideas. So on 4.1, we were on track to spend under $1 million on this line item, but we had previously budgeted 1.2 million. We haven't historically spent all of that amount, but this is the one item. So I split the difference and had 1.1 million, and then we're having this discussion, and we are under right now at $100,000. So this could be an area where we say we actually want to, that's where we want to put $100,000, and we're going to really work hard to try to spend that money to meet the needs of families. So I think that's what I'm hearing. And so that's kind of we'll say that's our default right now, but we still need to actually approve it in its total here, but I'll just put that out there. So make sure if you have other ideas or something else, then do voice that. The other thing I wanted to add on to that Ivy brought up, and Greg spoke about this as well, is the wellness centers also have the ability to do some work and some outreach, and they're kind of that base where, the sky's the limit, but could we use expanded learning opportunity grant funds, just recommending to the district, as one-time funds to actually get those started across the board. And then Ivy, that is a place where there can be those sort of advertisements and that sort of reach out as well, because you're making a more personal connection. Nishi?
Yeah, I think based on our last surf meeting, like 4 out of 5 high schools have already started some sort of wellness center. So I'm not like, obviously like more funds the better, but in terms of if like putting more money towards something that has already been started would be the best. Like in terms of wellness center, I feel like advocating like that money to go towards counselors might make more of a tangible impact.
Okay. All right. And we have counselors up next too. So that's a good idea. And that's why it's also awesome to have students here, because they actually know what's going on there. Devanshi.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Nishi there, because I'm at Irvington. We do have a wellness center, but I do have to admit that the outreach there isn't that great. Like, we have a website, and like people don't really pay attention to that kind of stuff. So I feel like the money could be better spent on like more reliable mental health services, instead of like, because we already have a mental, like a health, like a wellness center. We do post stuff on like our social media and stuff, and I just generally feel like people don't interact with it as much, so it's like not that helpful in terms of like outreach and like getting people to like go use mental health services.
Okay, thank you. And did you have something on this topic? Again, no. Okay, all right. Okay, so all right, and so then our last line item here is on counselors. So for an increase of that about $400,000, this would be able to fund a few extra positions so that the identified 8 to 10, and we would let the district, they have more of the demographics that they can drill down to, but what they think would be appropriate for the elementary schools that could be funded through LCAAC, and take them from a half a counselor to a full counselor at the elementary level. It can still be our recommendation as a committee, however, because of the extenuating circumstances that we're in, we could ask the district to expand that and hire additional counselors using the expanded learning opportunity grant funds. But we wouldn't be able to, across the board, justify that expenditure totally out of LCAAC, just because of the way that our unduplicated students are distributed throughout the district. But that was something that came up in a lot of places. Anna?
Question. Do our middle schools and high schools have enough counselors, or is it just the elementary schools that need more counselors? I would presume that it's across the board for all.
That is a great point. We got we got a lot of our feedback on elementary counselors. So I only took things that were tangible to me as chair of this committee. But that doesn't mean, Anna, that we could then put something else in now. That is absolutely why we are having this meeting. We are at the funding total that we're at. So we either reallocate, or we could amend that we not only propose elementary schools have, those additional half, but we also say that we propose that there be additional hiring at the secondary for a counselor per, or something like that. We can request that, and then of course it's up to the trustees to decide on how to utilize that. So okay, hopefully that answers. Yeah. Anna, I'll go to let you first, but Anna, it's an order for anyone right now. We are amending this and then approving it. So I want to make sure at any point people can say, I'd like to add this, and then we'll get approval. So that's totally in order. That's what this meeting's about.
Okay, is this a good point or a good time to consider getting more counselors, or proposing that we get more counselors for the secondary schools, because they're hurting as well? I'm sure they are. And at the elementary level, it's smaller population, but once they start moving on to the middle schools and high schools, population gets much bigger, It's more scary for some of the kids to begin with pre-pandemic. Now, in the pandemic and post-pandemic, I'm sure there's a lot more going on, a lot more people needing help, or a lot more, students needing help. Maybe the high school students that we have, reps that we have online right now, maybe they can, speak to this, what's going on in their school climates. But I'm concerned about all of them. I am concerned about elementary, but I'm concerned about the kids across the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Letty?
Yes, some of the thinking behind that we heard also from the parents around elementary counselors is about the early intervention at the lower grades. So I think that was also some of the impetus for that. Also, because some of our elementary schools can average as many as 700 students. And so we do have small elementary schools, but we've got some pretty large elementaries as well. And some of the thinking was, looking at the other funding sources, the ELOG, for example, because it's one-time money, we would look at partnering with the community-based organizations in the city. And that was some of the thinking behind that, so we can provide some additional counseling support at the secondary schools. And then, kind of doing some of that thinking. Also, looking at the social worker piece, there may be the possibility that those positions would perhaps focus more at the secondary, and looking at the elementaries, the counselors. That was so that there's something for everyone. And I know that's what Mr. Bailey was starting to look at as well.
Thank you, Letty. So, Anna, then we could definitely add in here support for secondary counseling services as well. And then Letty has shared kind of some of the different ways we might do that through expanding partnerships, listing what would be temporary counselor positions, right? Because which we've done, for example, when there were class size reductions, but the state was giving us only every year we had to get a class size grant, we would list those as temporary positions so that people coming in knew that. And that would be this sort of thing. So is there any objection to Anna's suggestion of an amendment there on 4.6 to recommend not only elementary school using those expanded learning opportunity grant funds, but also to increase secondary counseling services? Okay, all right, so seeing none, I'm gonna have that noted. And now that we have that special meeting, we'll have time. Letty can help us send out the notes and kind of what the recommendations would be, and then the school board trustees would be able to actually get our recommendations for that meeting. Okay, so that brings us to the end. So I've noted that change that we just have under cell G11 to add in recommendation for secondary counselors. And I've noted that we want to increase the 4.1 back up to 1.2 million. And we're going to try really hard to spend it in this upcoming year, and we'll get an update. And Letty talked about some of those ways that we might expand it, and shared some awesome ideas too, so we can get creative and try to reach the families that we serve. All right, so is there any objection with those two amendments to approve then our LCAAC proposal for the district? All right, so I am seeing none, which triggers, I know, all the work for Letty and Steve and everyone writing up all the things that that we have approved to recommend to the trustees. All right, so I'll bring that down. Okay, and that is it for this evening. Quick meeting. Thank you all for being flexible and attending today, and for the great questions and discussions. And then we'll see everyone for our next meeting on the 24th, which actually now I'm realizing what we can do is I'll have a document that actually says there are ELOG recommendations so that you can see it at that meeting, and that's in time before the meeting for the school board on the 26th. So that'll give you a last glance at just that portion as well on ELOG, but you already we've approved the LCAAC and are done with that. Letty?
Yes, and actually I will take these notes because unfortunately, the board will be voting on it and it's such a quick turnaround. I don't want to be disingenuous that you'll be able to give more input later. Certainly you can, but it's the county, they're taskmasters. I got to get this into the county and Steve's going to kill me. So, but anyway, but definitely your notes are there. I really appreciate that Trustee Jones is here as well. And so we're listening and we'll start to work on it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We are adjourned at 5:47. Have a great night.